Hello, Novocastrians. Welcome back to the Jetstream. Obviously, the season has now finished, but we thought it's been a while since we've had our good mate Maurice Bisetto, Executive Chairman at Maverick Sports Partners and the Newcastle Jets, on to talk over some stuff around the club. So we thought, considering the season we've had, it's worth checking in and seeing how far ahead or on schedule we are. But mate, Maurice, welcome back to the Jetstream, mate, for our third chat by the looks of it.
Yeah, thanks, Furns. Yeah, good to be back. And I think probably the last time we spoke was probably around 12 months ago.
Yeah, I think it was February last year, I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we did go over a fair bit of stuff in that episode.
Yeah.
And quite a lot of stuff. I think this was possibly a couple of months before Tane came on board and a couple of other appointments. So obviously, we went through quite an in-depth conversation about future plans and bringing those sorts of people on and hiring people where it's necessary. How on track do you think you are from an ownership perspective of? I don't want to get into corporate speak like KPIs and KPIs and all those buzzwords, but your plans for the future. How on track are you? And also taking into consideration the season we've just had,
yes.
How far ahead is that side of things compared to where you're hoping to be at this stage? Because I don't think 12 months ago, if you'd have said we would have had two trophies and we were just two penalty kicks away from a grand final, I don't think we would have quite believed you.
Yeah. Well, what did I say back then? I think I was still pretty bullish about the future and the playing group that we had at the time. But yeah, look, I think I can talk pretty transparently about where we are, where we are on track. And let's start off the field. I mean, when we got involved with the Jets pretty much 2 years ago, it was in May 2024. So we're right on 2 years. We had a 3-year strategy that we wanted to implement and execute. And I think off the field, across the board, and there may be a few swings and roundabouts, but we're 2/3 of the way through. I think we are on track in terms of what we wanted to achieve, certainly off the field, right? Now, there are a couple of wobblies in there. One I talked about the other day, and I think James Gardner sort of reported in the Newcastle Herald, the APL distribution to the clubs going from 2 million to 500,000.
Yep.
The year we bought the club left probably a 1.5 million a year hole that maybe we hadn't anticipated back in May of 2024. That announcement sort of came out in July, so a couple of months up later. But look, other than that, I think everything's pretty well on track, and we're 2/3 of the way through where we want to be. So we've got another season ahead of us to sort of get to the end of that season and have everything in place that we want in terms of resources and corporate partners and sponsors, and have all the things that we'd like to have and be totally fit for purpose.
Yeah. Obviously, you had your appearance on the Incredible Lives with Caney podcast last week or the week before. In it, you did specify that the losses had been reduced, and we did have a conversation. I think it was either our first or second chat we had with you. The aim was to be self-sustaining. Now, a couple of figures that you bandied about, 6 million a year loss, or was that total loss?
No, when we bought the club's losses were running at around $6 million a year.
And we've halved that.
Yeah, and that's on top of like I said, 1.5 million less.
Yeah.
From a APL grant or distribution. So we've made good inroads. We've probably got another. I think we've got another year. We'll probably forecast and budget to make a loss for financial year 27, with a view in it sort of in line with our strategy to be break even for the financial year ended 2028.
So what's that look like? I mean, because we've had we've had a unprecedented success. We'll get to the on the field stuff in a minute, but corporates up. The last couple of games of the year, the attendances were up. People are coming back in droves, both support and business. How I suppose we've had a really good result, and the work that's been done by yourself and all the guys in the office can't be understated. How do we get from we've halved the deficit, but with regards to, obviously we've had the news come out last week that the APL's re-signed with Paramount for another 3 seasons. It doesn't
Yep.
sound like, because there was no crowing from the rooftops, this was for more money. So we're assuming that the APL grant's not going to increase a great deal. So how do we go about bridging that gap further? Is it simply by trying to get above the break-even point for stadium attendances, or more corporate partners? Is it bringing in Is it bringing in more investment? How do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, that's the $6 million question.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So and the answer to the question is, there isn't a single thing that we can focus on that will actually shift that dial to the extent that we need. It's a combination of all of the, pretty well standard revenue streams that football clubs generate. So, obviously an important factor, and we hopefully anticipate a bit of an increase in the APL grant off the back of the renewed broadcast deal for the next 3 years. So hopefully that will bridge the gap a tiny bit. And again, it's growing memberships, it's growing attendance, it's growing your corporate partners and sponsors, growing your merchandise sales. So, collectively, hopefully we can, continue to grow and improve those metrics, which will continue to bridge that sort of gap to sustainability.
Right.
I'd love to say, look, if we got 15,000 every week for our next season's 13 home games, we're going to break even. That's not going to be the case.
Yep.
Happy to talk about the detail and the metrics around that, because I know some of the your followers on the Facebook site did ask questions around attendances and what is a break even attendance. So happy to get into detail if that's where you want to go.
Yeah, well, that was to be my next question, was what is that? Because I know from previous chats with previous administrations that it sort of fluctuates. It's sometimes, depending on the deal, it was sort of around the 10 to 12,000 mark. Sometimes it was a bit higher, sometimes it was a bit lower, but it seems to be around 12-ish is about the break. Is that still the case, or are we having to look at a higher number? Obviously, with different amounts of people are paying, it's going to be a fluid number. But what sort of around the mark where the club's going to be happy with this is starting to make money rather than costing us money?
Yeah, okay, and we've had some really productive. In fact, I just got an email today with a draft term sheet for because our 5-year stadium agreement ended this year, so we're just in negotiations of a new agreement, and I've just had an email from Venues New South Wales that I'm working through at the moment, and they've been really supportive and really helpful. They understand the importance of the Jets in Newcastle, and the sort of financial strain that playing in a stadium like McDonald Jones, when you've only got 5,000 people turning up, it does become economically not viable, right?
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to sound cute when I answer your question, but the reality is, it's not the aggregate attendance that's the key, right? Because if I take this year, for example, we've got 9,000 members. I think 9,300 was about the final number. And if all the members turned up and we don't sell a ticket, we'll have a crowd of 9,300 people, but it's still going to cost us 60 to 70,000 to actually play that game in that stadium.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at, your sort of average ticket price could be around, I don't know, I know the GA is about $20, but then you've got concessions, you've got kids. So if we can get sort of 5,000 ticketed people, right, And that could be, you could only have 5,000, but if no members turned up and it was just tickets, we'd probably break even.
Yep.
So what we'd love to see is 15,000 people, which is 10,000 members turn up and 5,000 tickets. And that's a sort of break-even crowd. It won't cost us money to play at the stadium in that particular game, right? So it's really about the ticking more than the total aggregate attendance.
Yeah, right. So out of the 9,300, how many of those are 3 game memberships and sort of ones that are going to be every game?
Yeah, look, the bulk, probably 90% are season memberships.
Yep.
And what we find on average, between 40 and 50% of our members turn up. So when you're looking at an 8,000 crowd, it's generally 4,000 members and 4,000 ticketed. When we get to 10,000, that can, quite often be, it's generally somewhere between 40% and 60% split between ticketed and members.
Yep.
Right? Obviously, when you get to, that last game against Central Coast, the derby, when we the RAF round, when we were presented with the premiership plate, those 20,000 people, that was a fantastic result financially from a ticketing point of view, and obviously only no more than 9,300 people were members, and all the rest were ticketed, right? Yep. So they're the things that dreams are made of. But if that became the regular outcome for the Jets, that'd be a long way to achieving our sort of financial sustainability goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we saw with the steady increase as the closer we got towards the end of the season, we saw what could happen over time. Obviously, we get a bit of a bump in crowds with success on the pitch, but obviously that's very difficult to replicate season in, season out. So it's about trying to get those people back. I was at a couple of those games before. I was also at the derby as well, and it's just a completely different. Football's obviously a different atmosphere and different beast altogether, right? But the more people you have in that stadium, the better the atmosphere. It builds on itself. And fingers crossed, with the amount of people that have come through the gate towards the end of the season, we've got more people that are going to be more willing to part with a membership or be more willing to come more often next season. There was a lot of people, I think, and we did have when we had a chat with Tane a couple of months ago, we were sort of in the middle of, I think maybe at the beginning, sort of just starting to see this uptick with the run of games we'd been on. I think it was about February we had a chat with her, February or March. And we were just starting to see that ramp up in attendance. And that generates its own momentum and its own atmosphere. So fingers crossed people are over that wait and see hump. And it was also mentioned, I think, I think Caney brought it up about the Novocastrians are fickle bandwagoners. We jump on when the team wins and jump off when the team loses. But hopefully we're going to be getting to the point and people are over that hump where we're not having to try to convince them to come back anymore. Is, I suppose, a very long way of getting to that specific statement.
I appreciate your optimism. I don't think we're quite there yet. I mean, I think there'd be a lot of people. Like, if it was me, I'd be saying, it was a great season, but is it really going to happen? Was I in a dream? Is this really going to happen again? And look, there's no doubt that there's still a bit of doubt across the fan base and across the communities. I think we're going to need to back up that success. And I think it's, I talk about financial sustainability, but I think sustainable success will help drive that as well. And that's not lost on us in any way. We know that the best chance of having that financial sustainability is having sustainable success on the field. Very, very important. So that's why everyone's, everyone, back office, football department, are working really hard to make sure that we can continue that success. But certainly I think the one thing that the fans and the members can And, like I was just talking the other day, a GA membership's $200, right? That gives you 13 home games. I reckon anyone who is a GA member, or any member that turned up in that last game on against the Coasties on Anzac Day would have said, look, this experience today alone, is worth my whole membership ticket. So
absolutely.
And it's a very different experience to when you're buying a membership and going to 13 home games where you're lucky to get 4, 5, 6,000 turn up to a game, in a hollow stadium with a hollow atmosphere. I think that really started to change this year, and we've worked hard to, not just market the club, market the games, and try and bring fans in, but also our activations and our entertainment. We had the Shannon Knoll, right? So who would have thought? We're in good form, but we're playing Sunday, 6 p.m. Like, it's a graveyard shift when it comes to hosting a game of football, right? And Shannon Knoll came along, and Tom Kerr was the Jewelers were our match day partner. We had 14,000 turn up on the Sunday against Macarthur Bulls, right? Who bring no one. They don't even get crowds at their games, let alone away fans. So what an incredible result, and then there's sort of just continued on from there, and hopefully that second half of the season. I think the key change was that Boxing Day game where I know we lost 5-4, but it was just such a cracking, entertaining game. Like, even as a staunch fan, you go home obviously disappointed in the result, but excited about what you've just witnessed.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can just continue to put on that show and make sure that we try and do everything possible to, engage with the fans and the members, and, give them something that they're proud of and really want to come and watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's what I can't remember where I said it, but I think I've been saying it for years. It's been the turnaround, I think, this season that we've seen Millsy's instilled in the squad, with the team never giving up. Like you said, that game, even though we lost it 5-4, it was still, they were pushing to the light. They never gave up. They never sat back. They're always going forward. They're always positive. We're always moving the ball around. And that's what's going to bring it's been a common criticism, I think, over the years, that especially in derbies, for instance, that the two groups that actually cared the most about the derbies in seasons past has been the Jets fans and the Central Coast players, not the other way, or not the opposite side of that coin. It just seemed to be the Jets players not always putting 100% effort in, and you can't say that this season Millsy hasn't got those players on the ball 100% of the time, going full tilt. It might not have always worked out in our favour due to youth and inexperience and injuries, whatever, but can't really say that the playing group and the coaching staff haven't been bleeding, for want of a better word, for the club and for the supporters, and that's been something that Millsy's definitely specified on a number of occasions, including after getting the plate, they wanted to win the right to get the fans back in the stadium, and that's I think job's done. Obviously, it's going to be interesting to see how this season compares to last season. This off season compares to last off season, because he's got a pretty big job to do again. But yeah, he's got all the building blocks in place. It's just going to be a question of how it all unfolds, I suppose.
Yeah, no, exactly, and he's a pretty determined individual, Millsy. I think what I can assure the fans and supporters is that next season will be a similar approach and style to this season.
So you did mention on Caney's podcast that we've got him for 2 seasons with an option of a third. You didn't sound confident that he's probably going to be around in another 12 months' time, especially if he has the success. Because this has happened before. It happened with Carl Robinson. Or the other side of the coin, we've had a year of success and then there's been a big drop off. But keeping things consistent is going to be even more difficult, some would say, in this off-season, purely with turnover of pivotal players. So obviously, how important is not just the work of Mark, but Nigel as the football operations manager. They're going to be having a lot of sleepless nights, I think, and a lot of reviewing a lot of spreadsheets to work out where we're going to be going from here.
Yeah, look, the football department, they work tirelessly throughout the year, and this time of year is no different. Obviously, everyone's always after continuous improvement, right? They say so. We could sit here and say, look, I'd love to keep the same squad of 28 players that we had this year, but I'd probably say, well, no, we have to continuously improve, and there needs to be refreshed, and that's just a function of the business that we're in, right? In fact, I had a question the other day which sort of I think sums it up to a large extent. The question was, what's easier, signing new players or keeping existing or re-signing existing ones? And my answer to that question was, well, if you finish 10th, it's harder to sign new players. If you finish first, it's harder to keep existing ones.
Yeah.
So we are at a little bit of it's a bit of a function of our success is the situation that we're in terms of the player group.
It's also, and there was quite a number of, we're probably going to cover half of the questions in one fell swoop that have been posted via Facebook, mainly all due to the fact that we have such a large cohort off contract and a lot of them not coming back. Just have a chat about what you think. Obviously, with regards to that, you're in a bit of a unique situation with regards to you came in basically halfway through these players' contracts. We didn't have the success last season, as in the first season you were in. You were here. That we'd hoped to try and get those players to re-sign for longer deals. So obviously the focus was to just work with what we had and let them run out their contracts. And obviously also the added wrinkle was the how do I put this without finding a legal email in my inbox later? He who shall not be named, the player agent who most of those players would probably be signed to, causing some issues, and the club wanting to diversify the agent representation across the club. So a lot of those players are tied to that particular agent. How's I suppose first and foremost, it's a bit of a, again, like I said, it's a bit of a unique situation with regards to that and with regards to where you came in with these players' contracts. But how are we going with re-signing some of those players that are still under said agent to be able to? We know some of those players are going to leave, but are we going to be able to keep hold of some of these players going into the next season? Or any?
Okay. Yeah. No. We're well. Let's start with, look, agents, and this is not about one agent. This agents are they're doing their best for their clients, right? It's just a function of the business we're in. It's a global thing. It's common across many sports, and it's part of doing business, right? Is having to deal with representatives. What we sort of did is just sort of try and minimise, the sort of concentration risk to any one particular agent, which then could potentially, cause issues if the concentration risk is just too high. Yeah. There's just too much at stake, and then it's always good to open up, to other networks and other agents and open up access to play. So, we just implemented a policy that sort of tried to manage that risk. But that really doesn't impact on which players we sign, which players don't, which players leave. Ultimately, it's the player's decision to leave. Anyone who says, well, he's leaving because of an agent, that's crazy to think that, a player would leave that, actually didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
Right. So it's ultimately the player's choice. Right. So we will lose players, right? It's just a function of our success and the players that so I'll go back to let's go back to when we bought the Jets. Okay, most of the players were already contracted, and that was locked away. And then a season later, Millsy comes in, and I think a new coach really needs 3 transfer windows to be able to sit back and say, this is now my squad, right? So when he came in, we did release some players, signed some new ones. Window came along, some players left, signed some new ones. I think Schuschner left, Zach Clough came in, etc. So this period now, this pre-season period will be Mark's 3rd window, and I expect, at the start of next season, it will be, Mark's squad. He's had every opportunity to sign who he wanted to sign and release who he didn't want to sign and bring players in. So that's just part of Mark and the football department's role in trying to pull together the best squad they can within the financial constraints that they operate under. And when you talk about financial constraints, I'd love to win every game. I'd love to win every trophy, and that's what we're going to try and do. However, there needs to be some fiscal responsibility in doing that. So the players that are leaving that we wanted to keep, we offered contracts, and that was, I think, James Garner again. He loves writing about players off contracts, and he did an article. I think it was something like we disrespected a whole bunch of them with the offers that we put in front of them. But the bottom line is, had we re-signed all of those players under the terms and conditions that they were after, without improving the squad one iota, right, we would have spent an additional 30% of our salary cap. Okay? So one of the great things about Mark and his football department is when they look at re-signing, signing and building the squad, they do consider what they would call value and what the players, sort of market value might be, vis-a-vis similar players. So it's done with not just, it's not just about the football. Obviously, that's very, very important, the player's ability and the player's character, but it's also done with some fiscal responsibility because we don't want to go broke. Yeah. Right. And a lot of the times you'll see where the club's gone broke 4 times in 20 years, it's because they've overspent on players, largely. I can blame Venues New South Wales and McDonald Jones Stadium as being a non-feasible option. But the breakdown of each of those times was largely around overspending on players, which you've been around through those 20 years. You probably know exactly the players that, probably the club shouldn't have spent that sort of money on. So it's just the nature of the beast, and we'll work really hard to put a competitive squad on the park next year.
How much large is the squad going to need to be to cater for ACL elite commitments?
It's not necessarily a function of being larger. Like we had quite a big squad this year, and people sort of forget we had 3 that were out for season-ending injuries with ACLs. Yeah. Right. So hopefully. Oscar will be back stronger than ever, and also Alex and Christian. I'm not sure exactly how he's going with his rehab, but it's also about getting players that maybe are a bit more durable as well. Because travelling to Asia at least 4 times and playing an additional 8 games in a very, very tough competition. Is going to require, it's going to increase player loads and rotation is a part of it, but so is durability. And I think with experience comes durability. And I'm not suggesting, sort of old guys. I'm just suggesting that those more experienced footballers that can manage the loads a little bit better than, youthful, exuberant young players that, may be less experienced in managing their bodies.
There was a question that somebody put up with regards to getting a marquee player. I can't find it specifically. I'm assuming it's in that very long thread that was that's on the Facebook post. But is that something the club's looking at doing? A marquee player?
Look, you're always on. We wouldn't not look at an opportunity to sign a marquee player, and we can. I mean, define marquee player for me, please.
Well, exactly right. Are you looking for somebody who's a big name player like a Juan Mata, or are you looking at somebody who is an unknown quantity like a Thomas Broich that we then saw, Besart Berisha, all these sorts of players that nobody had ever heard of, but eventually became marquee players because they were of a higher quality and standard, justifying the extra spend on them. So we've sort of seen both sides of the coin in Newcastle, and I would
Mario Jardel.
Yeah, exactly right. He might still have a pair of boots ready to go, but what is that part? Is there part of us? Is that part of the strategy? I suppose is the question.
Look, the ponds that we would be fishing in, we're probably more likely to find Thomas Broich and Besart Berisha rather than a World Cup winner and Champions League winner. However, there are those opportunities if and when they are presented, and occasionally they do. We look at with all seriousness, and especially going into a season where we're going to be playing in the Asian Champions League elite campaign, and hopefully we can progress through to later stages and see Cristiano Ronaldo strut his stuff at McDonald Jones. I think that would just be awesome. And we're just going to need the right type of players, both individually and collectively, to get to that point.
Well, Mo Salah's available, so...
Yeah, no, not. Yeah.
Well, even
mate, how good would that be?
Well, that would be it. Would be fantastic. You definitely get quite a few red shirts in the crowd. I can definitely guarantee that. Now there was a question.
I did speak to Craig Johnson and said, look, can you have a chat to a couple of your Liverpool mates and see if we can. They'd be prepared to put the boots on for the Jets, and he goes, I think Kenny's a bit old for you. So I didn't mean going on there.
Now there was also another question that someone posted up, just going back to the financial side of things, with regards to the New Balance partnership. Obviously, I think just purely looking at the kits around the ground, that's been a pretty decent success. How's it been from the club side of things? And are we looking at expanding the offerings? Because I noticed the offering's been a little bit different than what we've offered in the past, and also what's available at other clubs.
Yeah, definitely the offering will be increased, and we've been working pretty much all season. Our Brooke and Matt and look after the merch side of things have been working on a sort of non-technical suite of items and sort of, leisure type stuff, hoodies and the like. And we'll see that next year. And look, New Balance have been a great partner. And, I think for the first time in a long time, probably since Reebok, the Jets have been going around in a sort of world-renowned sports brand in terms of its apparel. The other thing that, we've had to work through this year that maybe not a lot of the fans and members are totally aware of. Historically, with Legend and Viva before that, we don't control the merch. It's controlled, sold by Legend, and we just take a commission based on the amount of stuff that they sell, right? So it's sort of totally out of this year. For the first time in a long time, we've brought that in-house, and we run the merch program like we're a retail store, right? So we buy the stock, sell the stock, et cetera, right? As opposed to just sitting back and letting
someone else
do the whole thing. So that's also been a learning experience, and again, that will be a better process next season, no doubt, with an expanded range of items that will be available to all our fans and members.
Right. The is there a plan to get a physical store or to get stock into retail outlets, or is that purely going to be, because I think possibly they're available at Rebel, I'm not sure, but I have seen that they're available on the Jets website and also Big Brand Outlet as well.
Yep. And Rebel, yes,
Yep.
that's right.
But is there going to be a physical Jet store that there has been in the past, but has sometimes been found to be maybe a little bit more of a financial millstone rather than a viable option?
The plans are that we will have an official retail store in the not too distant future. So they're certainly in the merch plans, but we just want to make sure we can sort of walk before we start running.
Yeah, because I mean, not necessarily criticisms, but I suppose areas for opportunity have been long lead times and pre-orders and all that sort of thing. Are we looking to do another run of the Australia Cup jerseys? That's been something that I think is going to be brought up at the FRG meeting, but it's something that I missed out the first time around. But yeah, things like Premier shirts are sort of a 3 to 4 week lead time, and you're not able to sort of buy one and get one in your hand physically straight away and wear it to a game where we're getting the Premier's plate, that sort of thing. I know you sort of, yes, it's difficult to get that sort of thing, especially with a manufacturer that has to manufacture these things. But is there opportunities to improve the availability, I suppose?
Yeah, well, look, we only really secured the premiership on the Sunday before we were playing on the Saturday, right? So turning stuff around and having it in the merch store at the stadium or somewhere, in 5 days, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That's possible, and regardless of what. It would have taken a leap of faith to get them done earlier on the assumption or the presumption that we would be premiers. And there's a few superstitious people flying around the Jets, me being sort of the leader of that mojo gang, and we just didn't want to mess with the karma, right? No. So
that's fair enough. Yep, we've had a few people walk under ladders in seasons past. That's happened before. So absolutely.
But one thing, when it comes to merch and when it comes to availability and speed to market and all those things, we're always trying to get better, right? So again, the important point is this year we were in sort of control of it, and that means the product risk is on us. If we overorder, that's going to be just an additional financial burden on us, or a financial loss if we have to, discount price all the remaining stock. So what we tended to do is order small bits at a time, and if we sell out, then we reorder. So it's just trying to be, and we just didn't have the data as to, because with not running your own merge program and Legend doing that, they had all the data. So we had not a lot to go other than experience of Brooke looking after the merch and just a bit of gut feel.
So a couple more questions I had before we go through the ones that have been posted to Facebook. First and foremost, and I probably should have said it at the beginning of the podcast, it has to be a massive thanks, and it's been specified a number of times in that post where I asked for questions. People didn't necessarily just ask questions, but they first and foremost wanted to thank you guys, the ownership, as well as the staff and the coaches for the season that we've just had, and can't be said enough how much this season's meant to quite a lot of people. In this, it's like we've got the club back, which is fantastic. So thank you specifically, and thank the ownership group, and thank Millsy and all his team, Tane, the team behind the scenes that probably don't get the flowers that they should, because when a lot of people behind the scenes don't necessarily get recognised. But I just wanted to specify that and state that first and foremost, and then move on to the question: what did you put the success down to this season? And is it something that you think we can replicate we sort of touched on it a little bit before, but I suppose expanding on the point, is it something we're going to be able to replicate once Mark moves on? Is this the style of play, the ethos, the mentality, etc.? Is that something that we're now looking to instill through the club, and we're hiring coaches, staff, and signing players based on that philosophy rather than what's available at the time or the best option that's available at the time? We've got a plan now, I suppose, is the question. Do we have a plan?
I think you've answered your own question, really, Furns, or the poster's question, in that, the success of this season, Mark and his football department, the whole lot of them, really deserve a big chunk of the credit, right? Because, they managed to, train, prepare, instill belief, instill bravery into, this group of players to deliver what they delivered. There's not a lot of credit that myself, the ownership group, and the team can take around what happened on that field, right? What we can, I think, take a little bit of credit for is, in that first sort of period of, say, 12 months, meeting everyone and, trying to get as many sort of boots on the ground out in the community and football, it was really clear what the Newcastle football people wanted, the style of football they wanted. You can see it in the Knights when you're watching the Knights and speaking to Knights fans and Knights player. There's an ethos through Newcastle about being hardworking, high energy, on the attack, never say die. It's almost like, you'd rather die on your feet than live on your knees style of football.
Yeah.
So when we decided to sort of change direction from a football department point of view, and that's both on the men's and women's side, when we sat down with Mark and the first thing, coaches that interview for coaching jobs talk about is their philosophy, what they believe in, what style they want to bring, and hearing that coming from Mark, it was like listening to a symphony orchestra. Everyone was right, to every note, everything was just in line, and sort of we knew straight away. And when Mark, and we talk about succession planning, like Mark, he's going to be a top head coach, right? You only an absolute fool would have any doubt that he's going to be successful, and I think he's going to coach at the highest level, right? So we need to prepare for that, and I can't wait in 10, 20 years' time to look back when he's won a Champions League, or he's won an FA Cup, or he's taking the Socceroos to a World Cup, whatever it is, to say that, he's the first step he took as a head coach was at the Newcastle Jets, and hopefully everyone in the whole community and region, can take pride in that. And ultimately, Mark's implemented this, but it's a club-driven philosophy and ethos. And like I said, I think even post-Mark, I'd love to think that not a lot is going to change in terms of that philosophy, right? And that's going to be really, really important for the Newcastle Jets going forward.
Would it be? I suppose this is would the plan? I suppose making plans for when Mark does eventually move on. Would the preference to be to promote from within? So either Rubes or Stav would move into the head coaching role, or would you be? Or they're not even interested in that at this point in time?
Well, look, we haven't. If we had spoken about that, it would only be sort of in dispatches and a little bit. Not tongue in cheek's not the right word, but we've had some of those conversations. We wouldn't restrict ourselves to, promoting from within. We wouldn't restrict ourselves from going externally and, doing the atypical global search for the best candidate.
Yeah.
Which might come out in a press statement at some point in a few years' time. But, obviously, if you've got assistant coaches working with Mark as part of a broader football department, and they've bought in, obviously, and they've been true to their beliefs, why not have a conversation? My thinking is more if Mark goes to head coaching job, like somewhere, Asia, Europe, wherever it might be when the time comes, does he take Nick Stav with him?
Yeah.
Right? Or does he take Ruben with, who from the football department will he take, or will he venture, so there's a whole lot of factors, but, obviously looking from within would be, a good starting point.
Yeah, well, and it'd be an easier option with somebody who's wedded to this, like someone who's in the system and is able to continue the work. But then again, is that something that whoever the candidate is going to be interested in at that point in time? They might not see themselves as being ready for that.
Yeah,
but
maybe Jurgen Klopp might be it.
Well, yeah, again, he's might need to get some of that Red Bull money in, I think, maybe to attract him. So I suppose the other another aside question I had was: is there going to be any need with moving into Asia to maybe add any more bodies to the coaching side of things? Strength and conditioning, recovery, video reviewer, that sort of thing.
We've already had those discussions with the football department, including Nige, that with the financial rewards of qualifying for Asia, that a big part of that needs to be used to make sure that we put our best foot forward. So, in a nutshell, there will be additional funds attributed to player salaries to enable the football department to improve the squad, and there will also be and need to be a chunk of money for football department personnel around physios, S&C, and making sure that we're appropriately resourced for the additional loads that are the additional travel that's going to present themselves, right? So it is a different, obviously a different environment, and Mark, football department, and Nige are already working, really hard to understand exactly what that's going to look like and how the logistics and the structures hang together to make sure that we put our best foot forward.
Is there an opportunity to maybe have discussions now that we've had the olive branch, and we obviously early on when you guys came in, Con was invited back to the club, and obviously he's going to be a resource, being the only one who's probably around that's going to be able to let you know what to expect. It's not necessarily going to be exactly the same thing, but is that a conversation that could happen at some point, or even just to get him back into the stadium to watch?
Am I going to ring Con Constantine and say, give me some tips about going to Asia? I don't. Con hasn't been well. I do actually catch up with Con and Natasha, not regularly, but every couple of months we bump into each other at the Newcastle United Sports Club, where he still goes to, and we have a bit of Chinese and talk about football. And he's still a passionate Jets man. He really appreciated the opportunity to come to a couple of games. He would have come to some games this year. Like I said, he's not been well.
Yep, okay.
So he's still sort of, I think, in recovery phase. And Natasha, they wished us all the best for the finals via text, and promised me that once he was up and about again, they'd certainly come back to a game. So
fantastic.
We'd love to have Con at one of our sort of Asian Champions League games at home if that was possible. Don't forget, when it comes to that, Millsy played in Asia. He's played in that competition. He knows, he knows which way's up when it comes to the Asian Champions League.
Righto. Okay, so get into a couple of these questions before we wrap things up. Mark Scaife, I think we pretty much answered your question around the financial side of things, and there was a long thread underneath that with myself and a number of other people. There was something that Ryan mentioned in this thread with regards to talk about getting our own stadium. That was something that you also mentioned on the Caney podcast. While we're only getting small crowds, that would probably be an option. But I suppose now that we've gotten to the point where we think maybe the long-term plan might be to grow into what we have at the moment rather than looking for an additional expenditure of trying to find somewhere and make it a small boutique stadium. I suppose the impression that I got from your answer to that was that we were more focused on a Jets home, as in a training administration hub, rather than focusing on the stadium side of things. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, you did. That's a home of the Jets is really sort of at the front end of sort of any infrastructure projects. Look, having said that, I think in Newcastle there is the need for a smaller boutique stadium to cater for multiple sports. Yep. So, local rugby league, our A-League women's team, the Knights NRLW team, Northern New South Wales could probably play the NPL final series. There's like a boutique stadium of 8,000 to 10,000 people with the right content and the right, if you put some retail in around it and you turn it into a hub that gets activated by everybody. That site at number 2, it's almost a perfect site to have something like that, and the Jets would support and I think there is a need for that. There's a need for a fair bit of sports infrastructure in Newcastle, to be perfectly honest. Not just a boutique stadium.
Is number 2 a bit constrained though? I haven't been to that ground myself in years, so I can't really remember what it's like. But is it a bit constrained with the footprint being able to expand?
It's certainly constrained, but just location wise, it's just I love going to watch the girls at number 2. Yeah. It's great on a nice sort of balmy afternoon, evening there on a Saturday or on a Sunday. It's lovely. Really nice.
Might need to make a phone call to our new Lord Mayor and just see if they might be able to start budgeting for it for a few years down the track.
Yeah, it'd be really cool. But ultimately, if we have another season like we just had, we had a 20,000 person crowd the last game. We had 14,000 against the Bulls. We had 12,000 crowds and we had a 10,000. If we've got an 8,000 to 10,000 seater stadium and we've got 10,000 members, we sort of hit our ceiling. So I always hoped and dreamed that a 30,000 seater stadium, or I think it's 30,000 at McDonald Jones, is something that we could strive to not necessarily fill every week, but even the stadium design. When you have 12,000 people, you really know that there's a crowd there. There's the atmosphere is really good, even though it's not even half full. You don't get that sense, from an acoustics and crowd interaction and noise. It's a really cool stadium, I think.
It'd be nice if the plan was eventually to finish it by putting proper seats and stands on the hills, and that would help contain the sound even more, and maybe acoustically would be even better. But we've been asking for that for years. It took us decades to get that Western Grandstand redone. So who knows how long that's going to take. So
wasn't the plan always to put stands at either end of the where the hills are?
That was the plan when we were looking at getting a World Cup here. And then I think that, once that fell by the wayside with everything that went on with that, it's just been put on the back burner, and who knows when it's coming back. Now, Ryan Littlejohn's had a couple of things around the kits. Did mention something about is there going to be a facility in the future to be able to get names and numbers printed on the kits?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll have to take that one on notice. It makes total sense. You know, all the football clubs around the world have their merch in the stores at the stadium that you can, you know, pick your player and get your number and name. I have to take that one on notice. Right. I'm not sure where we're at with that. Again, this is the first year that we've controlled the merch, right? So it was a bit. It was more like guys, let's not fuck it up.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you know, let's go from 0 to 100 and just run full pelt.
Under promise, over deliver, rather than the other way around.
Yeah. And like I said, and just put ourselves in sort of a situation that we just don't want to be in, because we're trying to bridge a financial gap, not widen it.
He also said, for the love of God, bring back the flyover for the RAF round. Was that something that was being looked at for this season?
No, we did it last year. We were going to do it this year for Anzac Day. That was the plan. I actually don't know the reason why it didn't happen.
They were pretty busy. They flew over the Branxton Anzac Day ceremony.
I thought it could have been two things, because it was Anzac Day. You know, I'm sure the Jets, a lot of them would have been in use for formalities elsewhere in other areas and jurisdictions. Also, it was about the time when fuel was going through the roof, and maybe they thought at the time it was just going to be too expensive, because those flyovers take a lot of fuel to do that too. So. I actually don't know the exact reason, but certainly it was our intention, and would have been a perfect scenario to have that on Anzac Day, which I thought was just a great day all round.
Absolutely.
Apart from the non-flyover.
Absolutely. And question without notice, is that something that the Jets could focus on and make it our thing going forward? In obviously the Mariners have the New Year's Eve fixture every year. Is that something we could do for even sharing it between the two grounds? Like one year we do Anzac Day at Gosford, the other year we do it in Newcastle. Is that something we could do around not just the derby, but around just Anzac Day at the Jets?
Yep, that's what part of the plan is, to sort of continue to build on the Anzac Day fixture. We had, I think it was Wanderers last year on Anzac Day. So that's something we want to try and secure going forward as a Jets day. Yep. The other one too is Boxing Day, where we're sort of, we sort of did it this year. That was the Bulls, the 5-4 Bulls game, but we're really going to try and make Boxing Day. Certainly continue to explore having Boxing Day as a Jets day. And work on a couple of key activations and really give it that sort of post-Christmas feel about it, and hopefully get it synonymous, in 20 years' time as the Boxing Day test in Melbourne.
George Marchetti added to his thanks for what you've done for the club and for the A-League. Maybe if not already in place, children under 18 free entry for matches if proof provided they're with a paying parent, and also said something about Newcastle's youngsters with a sell-on clause. Obviously, that's contracts going forward and all that sort of thing, but we've done kids go free and also kids involved in the local football competitions with tickets as well. How are those being taken up, and is that something that can be expanded upon?
Yeah, I think at the moment, again, we're getting into the detail here that I'm not overly familiar with a lot of the time, but I think it's something like kids under 12 are free with an accompanying adult.
Right.
And I know that through our partnership with Northern, that we every mini-roo registered child 12 and under gets a free membership. And I think they were taken over. We had over maybe 1,000 of those. I can't give you the exact number, but there's certainly opportunities for that. in terms of children under 18, I'll just have to, again, take that on notice and see what that means. I know there's students and concessions, and I don't think I don't think the ticketing's a hell of a lot, but certainly it's something we can take on.
Under 18s maybe giving away the farm a little bit, but definitely kids under 12 or kids that are involved in football programs throughout Northern would definitely be areas that I would hoping that is going to increase definitely next year, if not throughout the years. But and
those initiatives are already in place there, right? So
okay. Well, Craig Benson, we did already talk about marquee signings. Maria Griffiths, congratulations for an amazing season. Do we have the coach button down for a good time ahead? Obviously, we've talked about that.
Yes.
Members committee, we have the FRG. Is there, and I think they were looking at possibly getting new members in. I'm not sure what's happening with that at the moment. Third, she suggested, might you be open to an American-style pep rally to introduce the team at the start of the season, including in that might be nice to get our Jet Man and Jet Woman, or Benny and Jeanette, romping around again and being true mascots. Yes, a couple of people did mention that we haven't seen Benny the Jet around. We retired that, or is he just on leave of absence?
No, he's definitely not retired. I think Jason Hoffman left us in January, and he normally puts the Jet Boy suit on. The sad news, Jet Girl's gone missing.
Really?
I hope the team back in the office aren't too upset that I've let that out, but we can't find Jet Girl. But Jet Boy and Jet Girl will be back for season 26-27.
Fantastic. Actually, Mary Brennan brings up an interesting question. Looking forward to what brings obviously, she also added her massive thanks to you guys, plus Tane and everybody else. She's also hoping, she said she's looking forward to next season, what it brings with the new look men's squad, and then also mentions the women's squad. Obviously, we changed strategies with regards to the women as well as the men. Why do we think that it didn't necessarily, we didn't necessarily see the results in the women's side of things that we saw on the men's side of things?
That's a good question. They started really well. To be honest, I think where they finished on the ladder didn't look. I'm the first one to say ladders don't lie. However, I was at games like when they played Adelaide, where I don't know how they didn't win that game, and there was probably two or three of those. But certainly you could see. Like shoots coming through. The demographic of the girls was a bit different. They had a couple of injuries. So Anna Lee in goal sort of, probably missed a third of the back end of the season. Just some key injuries. A young group of girls, like a couple have just come back from the young Matildas. And in stages had 4 or 5 away with the young Matildas. They've got a lot of potential. I don't think they're far off. I think they missed finals by about, I think it was 5 or 6 points. It was just a couple of wins.
Yeah.
Those couple of wins were there during the course of the season for them. They just couldn't capitalise. Perth Glory was another one.
And we're always struggling. We always struggle in the women's due to the fact that such a long off season for them as well, and purely with the turnover of players. It's very difficult to get consistency, I think, with regards to the women's side. We do have quite a number of players that have been around for a while, but as soon as we get someone that stands out, they tend to move on to greener pastures, which is part and parcel of football. But with the smaller squads in the women's side of things, you probably feel that a lot more than you would necessarily with the men's side of things.
Yeah, but we were pretty stable. Tash Price still there, Claudia Chico, Soph Hoban, Cass Davis, who missed, was sort of injured for a fair bit of the year too, was a bit of a loss. Emma Dundas, Claire Adams, Lauren Allen. It was a pretty consistent squad. A few players leaving, maybe 4 or 5 and 4 or 5 coming in. I don't think they're far off, Furns. I think, second year round, with Stephen, and I think there's exciting times ahead for the girls too. They're not far off at all.
Unfortunately, I can't really speak to, unfortunately, with too much knowledge on the girls' side of things. It's very difficult for me to get to men's games on a regular basis than it is to get to the women's, unfortunately. I usually leave the women's side of things to a couple of the other guys, especially Dr. Emma. But, right. So Brett McKenzie, basically similar sort of talk that we had around players leaving. Contracts, longer deals, why are we losing Rose and Nata Bayliss, opportunities for the club to make some money. Again, like we sort of touched on earlier, it was probably more timing than anything when the contracts were signed and when you guys came in, not necessarily the option to be able to sign them to get transfer fees for them.
Yeah, look, yes and no. It certainly, the list management, and you probably, it's a question that Nigel Bogard could probably answer a little bit better than I can, but it's certainly not a perfect science, right? And I think if players leave because they're off contract for other opportunities, I don't have an issue with that. And I'd like to reconfirm to our supporters and our members and fans that, as much as you grow attached to some of these players, that they shouldn't have too much of a problem with it, have faith in the football department.
Yeah.
And that they know what they're doing, right? So and I don't want to sort of specifically name names in these instances, right? But a player leaving to go to clubs like Dundee or Cesena or whatever it might be, if they weren't free agents, a lot of these clubs wouldn't pay transfer fees for those players. Not every player commands a transfer fee. Okay, and
not every club can afford. Not every club can afford to pay transfer fees.
The Jets would never pay a transfer fee to sign a player, right? So all the pond that we fish in when it comes to players, especially international players overseas, are free agents.
Yep.
If they've got a year left on their contract, unless they can, mutually agree with their existing club to terminate that contract, we wouldn't pay a transfer fee for a player. Right? And a lot of the international clubs, even though there's more money in some of the countries in Europe, they're of the same ilk, right? So, those opportunities. And then, some players, yes, they've been key parts, but I'm pretty confident that our starting 11 in that semi-final against Sydney that we lost on penalties, seven of the 11 are going to be there next year, right? So that's a pretty good core. And then the last bit is, we can talk about players leaving, and let's look at like Lockie Bayliss had a tremendous year, right? Sort of didn't play much the first 7-8 games, sort of came into play when Battleado got injured and Groz got a bit injured as well. So and then he just took off. He just went to a different level, and now he's going to a World Cup, and it's just awesome, man. I'm wrapped for him because he's such a good kid, right? He's an absolute rip snorter, Lockie Bayliss. But, just on the assumption we have a full squad going into next year and every one of those players have a great pre-season and we head into round one, right? And we've got 3 midfielders to choose from, okay? And the pool of central midfielders are Max Burgess, Zach Clough, Alex Battleado, Will Dobson, Lockie Bayliss, Costa Grozos, maybe even throw Alex Nunes in there, right? To pick 3 out of that group is pretty tough, right? And if 1 or 2 were to go, what's left behind is still pretty decent, and that doesn't include what might come in.
Yeah.
So, of course they're all losses, right? They've been part of a great team, but sometimes that's just a function of the success we've had. Like, had we finished 10th, we probably lose half the players that are going to overseas opportunities, which we are wrapped for. That's what we're about, right?
Yeah.
Is to help develop young talent and get them to be the best versions of themselves that they can be and progress to the highest levels. But I'd rather finish first and lose a few more than finish 10th and lose less.
It sort of puts me going back to our earlier question about bridging that financial gap. How is there any focus going forwards on transfer fees maybe filling that gap?
Yeah, look, you'll get different views on this depending on who you speak to, and that's across all the A-League clubs and the APL. Transfer fees are an important part of our game and are an important part in closing that financial gap. But can you forecast with certainty revenue from transfer fees? Very difficult. It's almost like forecasting financial rewards from qualifying for Asian Champions League, right? They're very difficult to forecast. Personally, our strategy is really around being financially sustainable with the core revenue streams of our organisation, which are, ticketing, membership, merch, corporate partnerships and sponsorships, etc., and the APL grant revenue and essentially broadcast revenue, right? Making the game bigger and stronger, so all the clubs can participate in that. Banking, for me, transfer fees and qualifying for Asia are sort of below the line items that you're not going to say no to. They're great, but it's sort of like the cherry on top, if you like. And if we need to rely on transfer fees to be financially sustainable, it's a perilous strategy to try and execute. But having said that, we need to be better as a club to recognise our talent. So, for example, Will Dobson, we signed on a 3-year deal, right? He's around till 28, and he's probably one of the most exciting young 18-year-olds playing in the A-League. So,
absolutely,
I'd be surprised if he's not overseas in a season or two's time, from which hopefully he's really developed, even further and to another level where, transfer fee, could be obtained, for Will. And I still, I sort of look back and think the missed opportunity for us, which still pains me to this day. The second day we bought the Jets. The second day in, I had coffee with Archie Goodwin, trying to convince him to stay and things are going to change. And he'd already, I think the deal was already done.
Yeah.
But look at Adelaide, and that's Mark Milligan, right? Grabs him, 4-year deal, gets him fit, wins the Golden Boot, and then goes to Charlotte FC for $2.8 million, which might have been handy for the Jets. But it's a bit hard to convince a kid to stay when he's only made 20 sub appearances in the last 2 seasons, right? So we got to get better at that, and investing in our academy is one of the things we're trying to do, because the talent is there, the young talent. It's about like this year with all those new boys coming through, and Maxi Cooper coming through, Berticello going to a different level.
Yep.
Will Dobson being a sort of regular and key player in that team. So it was just great to be a part of, and actually what people have been saying about the talent that's in Newcastle, actually seeing that starting to be realised is that's just awesome.
Yeah, and I think we had this discussion with Tane, I think, talking around possibilities of bringing in some of the Central Coast Academy players that I think ended up getting let go when the Charlesworth handed back the licence. But it just seems that there's a higher quality. Do you think is it better coaching? Is it why we're seeing this higher quality of play? Or are we just doing the job better this time around, growing these players, that we're able to see more of these local talents develop through our system and then get their way into the first team? Because it's been pretty slim pickings, in the 20 years previous. We seem to be seeing we seem to be seeing better results now.
Okay. Look, without the history, it's a difficult question to answer. What I can say is when we bought the Jets, we didn't have any scholarship players, right? So our first 3 scholarship players for a period of time was when we signed Alex Nunez, Ben Van Dawson and Will Dobson on scholarships, right? They were the first scholarship players. So the year before there wasn't any, the year before there wasn't any. It's just a reflection of giving these players opportunities, right? So without having the data and what's happened in the past, what I can say is this: Newcastle has just simply, by the numbers of participants in the region, they're there. That they have to be, simply from a numerical point of view. The more participants you've got, the better chance that some of that's going to be highly talented, right? So they're there. The challenge is the identification. And where I'm going to give credit to, even though he's no longer with our organisation, is Damien Zane, who when we came in, he was across every kid in our academy and he knew which ones, he had faith in them. He pointed them out. Even when Millsy came on board, he helped identify these. And we've got coaches in a football department that are prepared to. It's not about taking a risk, but they're prepared to invest in these young footballers, and we will start to see the fruits of that. And so I just can't comment on why this has not happened in the past, but. We've now got 5 or 6 young kids from Newcastle, in that A-League squad, which is an incredible outcome. And this is where the girls have done a really good job because, there's probably about 10 young Novocastrians in the squad of that A-League women's squad that have come up through the ranks. So, guys like Max Cooper and Will Dobson, they've been in the academy since they were 9, 10 years old.
Yeah.
So we're starting to bear those fruits, and there's still a lot of talent. I don't know if any of you viewing the emerging Socceroos, emerging Matildas, what used to be called the Nationals, was on a couple of weeks ago at I think it was at Valentine Park in Sydney, in northern New South Wales. They're the under 16 boys finished 3rd in the competition, and they had I think 3 boys or 4 in the team of the tournament. Including Robbie Middleby's young fella, Jack Middleby, and Caden and a couple of others. So the talent's there, all right? They're 3 kids that have been picked over and above, Victorians, New South Wales kids, South Australians. It's there. It's just it's a matter of identifying them and developing them and working with them. And we've got the right people in the right places to really bring that to the fore, which is what I think the Newcastle football community like to see.
Well, I think that
more so than marquees.
Yeah. Well, I think that pretty much covers all the questions. Hopefully answers all the questions that people put up on social media.
No, Jets. What about the jet-shaped hats?
Well, yes. Look, the plan was to hopefully speak to Tane again, which might be. Okay, jet-shaped hats and the thickness of the membership cards.
I'll have to take that on notice again for the 3rd time.
Yep. No, fair enough. Look, thanks everybody for submitting the questions on the social media channels. Really appreciate it. Now that we've got all the hard questions out of the way, Maurice, what's your favourite memory of the season?
Oh, wow.
I mean, yeah, you could pick any one of Eli's 400 goals of the season contenders or any of the crowds.
No, look, I think there was a moment, there are probably 2 moments, right? They're pretty obvious. Eli's goal in that home semi-final, just the noise.
Yep.
The noise, cacophony of noise, and the length that the noise went for. I think 30 seconds after, the noise was still, people were still cheering. That was incredible. But for me, Anzac Day, it was a home and away. It was a dead rubber. I know we were presented with the Premier's Plate. I know it was an F3 derby. It was RAF round. So we had the kits that looked really cool. But having 20,000 people there and just sitting back and during the official ceremony of Anzac Day, it was quite reflective with the last post in the background and seeing that what you thought you could achieve or what you thought you could grow the Jets into was starting to come to fruition. And, looking around and just, through that sort of 5-minute ceremony, I just couldn't take my eyes off the crowd and the people. And like I said, I started to have horrible thoughts that, like I said, I think I said it on Kaney's podcast that if I went to a game and was looking at the crowd and we only had 5,000, I think I'd chuck it in. I just have a nervous breakdown and I think I'd have to chuck it in.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed those days for the most part are behind us. I think maybe inclement weather is probably the only thing that's hopefully see those crowds below 5,000 again. But, mate, like I said earlier on, huge thanks to you and huge thanks to the other members of the ownership group for everything that you've done to bring the Jets back to some period of success. And fingers crossed, and we know that the building blocks are in place for this to be not just what everyone has sort of seen in Newcastle before, where we've had a one good season and then it's just tailed off. It seems this time around that we've got some momentum behind us and some sustainability. So thank you for that. And we all, I think most of us have a lot more hope going forward that this isn't just going to be a one season wonder again, and then we're just going to be putting up with mediocrity for another 4 or 5 years. It looks like we've got the plans in place for it to be a sustainable period of, doesn't have to be trophies, but just success and stability would probably be, I think, what most Jet supporters would be happy with.
Yeah, well, I think that sums up, exactly what I was going to sort of say in a sort of wrap up is, we may not have the season we had this year and the number of trophies that we've had this year, but what we will have is work ethic and attacking bravado and the bravery that goes with that will continue to be the way forward. We want to make sure that what happens on the field represents the community, and it's what the fans and the members want to see and want to be represented in that way. And that will continue. And hopefully the season isn't mediocre, but obviously football's a strange game, and and Mark and the football department know that we may have flown under the radar a bit this year, and no one's tipping the Jets to make finals, and but all of a sudden we've gone from being the hunters to the hunted, and that's a different kettle of fish, and you would have seen that in the last 5 or 6 games of the season when teams were like really preparing, to play the Newcastle Jets as opposed to not really preparing to play them. You're just making sure that they executed what they wanted to execute to get the points. So I'm pretty confident that will continue. And, we don't need 20,000 every game, but if we can get the 10 to 15 on a regular basis and slowly grow that, I think that will go a long way to making the Jets sustainable and ensuring that win, lose or draw, they'll be around for a long, long, long time.
Mate, I don't think there's any better way to wrap it up. So all that needs to be said is, Maurice, thank you very much for your time, and we will speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Furns. Appreciate it, mate.